Hey there! Right now, you and I are going to take a journey, not just through space, but through time. And, more importantly, into the consciousness of a person who lived 1500 years ago. Today, we will walk 10 paths through 10 life situations that might seem ordinary, a minor blunder, or even an insignificant offense to you, a person of the 21st century. But for a person of that era, these were direct, well-trodden roads to public disgrace, horrific physical torment, or the edge of the executioner's block. We will talk not just about punishments, we will talk about the logic behind them. The logic of a world where the I is merely a temporary shell, and the true reality is your Varna caste, your clan, and your duty. We will go to that point in the past where the concepts of crime and sin were inseparable, where the law was not a boring collection of paragraphs printed in small type, but a living part of the cosmic order, Dharma. To break the law back then didn't just mean jaywalking. It meant breaching the very fabric of the universe, releasing chaos that threatened not only you, but also your family, your caste, the king, and even the gods. The severity of a crime was measured not by the amount of damage, but by how much it shook this divine order. Ready? Then let's take the first step. And we'll begin, perhaps, with the most fundamental thing, the thing that defined everything, food and touch. Chapter 1. The Path of the Shared Meal, or Boiling Oil in the Throat. So, you are a traveler, you're tired, exhausted from the long road. The sun is already setting, and you enter an inn located at the city gates. This is a place where merchants, charioteers, and wanderers stop. The common hall is abuzz with voices. Someone is arguing about grain prices. Someone is complaining about road tolls. In the corner, on mats, sits a group of venerable men. They are easy to recognize. They wear white, carefully washed clothes, and a sacred thread, the Danu, is draped over their left shoulder. These are Brahmins. They are unhurriedly discussing the finer points of Vedic interpretation, and in front of them on low tables are copper plates with boiled rice, ghee, clarified butter, and flatbreads. They eat in complete silence, with concentration, turning the meal into a ritual. You, a simple traveler, let's imagine that by birth you belong to the Vaishya Varna. You are a farmer or a trader. You're as hungry as a pack of jackals. There are almost no free spots, and without thinking twice, you sit down at the edge of the mat where the Brahmins are sitting. It seems natural to you. There's space. People are sitting. You reach your hand toward the shared basket of flatbreads. Stop. Freeze. Don't do that. If an artist were nearby to capture this scene, he would have to paint the Brahmins' faces contorted with horror and disgust. You have just committed one of the gravest violations of the unwritten, yet most severe law. You, a person of a lower and ritual status Varna, have encroached upon the ritual purity of the Brahmins. Your very shadow falling on their food is enough to defile it, and sharing a meal at the same table is a catastrophe. The Laws of Manu are our main guide through the labyrinths of morality and law of that era. It's not just a legal document, it's a treatise on how to live correctly, to not disrupt the harmony of the world. And the Laws of Manu on this matter are harsh and relentless. One who defiles a Brahmin with food could be executed on the spot. But more often, if the royal judge was in a lenient mood, a special, symbolic punishment was applied. They might pour boiling oil down your throat. Imagine that horror, a red-hot liquid that was meant to purify you from within, to burn out the very desire ever to approach the food of the chosen ones. Or they could cut out your tongue. After all, it was the tongue that touched the defiled food. The principle of an eye for an eye worked here with frightening metaphoricity. The organ with which you committed the sin must be destroyed. Through your action, You disrupted the fundamental order, the order that maintains the cycle of day and night, the floods of the Ganges, and the rotation of the stars. And punishment is not revenge, but a painful yet necessary tool for its restoration. Your scream, your pain, that's the sound of the universe returning to equilibrium. Interestingly, the concept of ritual purity permeated all of life. A Brahmin who ate food upon which the shadow of a Shudra had fallen had to fast and perform complex purificatory rites. He himself became impure. So his fear of you was quite sincere. You threaten not his wallet, but his soul and his place in society. Think for a second. What serves as such an invisible but absolute boundary for us today? Social, cultural. We don't cut out tongues for swearing, but are there impure topics and people in our society, associating with whom stains your reputation more severely than boiling oil? Where are the lines drawn that you cannot cross, even if they aren't painted anywhere? Chapter 2. The Path of the Sacred Cow, or the Brand on the Brow. Now imagine you're not a tired traveler, but a poor farmer from the low Shudra caste. You live in a small hut with a thatched roof on the outskirts of a village. The year has been terribly unproductive. The monsoon rains were late, the sun scorched the fields, and your patch of land didn't yield even a handful of grain. Your children have been starving for 3 weeks. They sit on the threshold with bloated bellies, looking at you with eyes full of silent questions. Your wife cries, hiding her face in her hands. You're ready to do anything, and that your neighbors, behind a strong mud brick fence, stands her, a well-fed, beautiful cow with big, moist eyes, the source of life, milk, butter, future prosperity. To the neighbor, she's almost a family member. To you, she's the only chance. At night, when the village falls into a deep sleep, you sneak to the pen, slide back the flimsy bolt, and lead her away into the darkness to save your children. In your head is the ultimate justification, the voice of instinct, stronger than any law. In your head is a cry of despair. In the head of the Brahmin judge, to whom you will be brought in the morning, since the neighbor will immediately raise the alarm. This is the greatest possible crime. The killing or theft resulting in death of a cow was comparable to killing a Brahmin, and in some texts, it was considered even worse. Why? The cow is not just an animal, it is the embodiment of the earth, fertility, selfless sacrifice. She is called Mother Cow. She gives milk from which ghee is made, an essential element of all sacrifices. She personifies the goddess of the earth. Killing a cow means striking at the very ability of the world to be fertile, at the ability of the gods to receive offerings. The punishment? The Laws of Manu, and offer a rich but always horrific choice. You could be executed by impalement, the most shameful and painful death, where the body is slowly pierced by a sharpened stake. They could cut off your hands and feet and leave you to bleed out for the vultures. But there was also a special, refined sentence, perhaps worse than a quick death. They would brand your forehead with a red-hot iron in the shape of a cow. And with this brand, which would never fade, you had to wander the country, begging. In our lives, we also have our own cows, things or principles that society protects with an irrational, almost sacred fury. Branded in a social sense. For what act could you be turned into an outcast, someone no one wants to deal with, whose name becomes a byword? And how different is that societal reaction from the ancient one, in essence? Chapter 3. The Path of False Witness, or Molten Tin for the Ears. Let's move from the rural backwoods to the bustling city center, to the royal court. Imagine a large courtyard in front of the ruler's palace. Under an awning, on a raised platform, sits the judge. he is necessarily a Brahmin, a deep elder with a piercing gaze, a scholar of sacred texts. Before him are two litigants. A dispute rages over land, debt, or inheritance. Today, you are a witness. Your words, what you say, will decide a person's fate. Perhaps it's your neighbor, a friend of many years. You know the truth. He did borrow money from the moneylender and couldn't repay it due to the crop failure. But the moneylender is a rich and influential man. He secretly sent someone to you with a bag of silver. Or, even worse, threatened your family with violence if you told the truth. The judge looks at you. He calls upon you to speak the truth, reminding you that through the mouth of a witness speaks the goddess of justice herself. You know the truth, but fear or greed ties your tongue. You lower your eyes to the dust, swallow the fixed saliva, and utter the rehearsed false lie. The words fall into the silence of the court, like heavy stones into still water. Do you think you fooled the judge? That everyone believed you? No. In the understanding of that era, you didn't just lie. You did something immeasurably worse. You defiled the very institution of truth. By lying in court, you made shaky the foundation upon which not only the kingdom, but the entire cosmos rests. You struck at the very basis of existence. The laws of Manu prescribed various punishments for perjury, depending on the severity of the case, from a fine to exile. But one punishment described in the texts strikes the imagination with its monstrous symbolism. A false witness who lied about an important matter, deciding a person's fate, could have molten tin poured into their ears. This punishment is pure metaphor, embodied in flesh and blood. You abused your hearing. You heard the truth, but spoke a lie. You perverted the very purpose of having ears, so be deprived of them forever. Eternal silence will become your prison. A question for you. How responsible are we today for our words, before our own conscience and before society? We don't pour molten metal into ears, but we pour streams of disinformation, gossip, half-truths, and fakes into the ears of the world. And the consequences of this can be devastating for people's fates, for entire countries. Do we feel shame? Or are we already used to living in a world where truth is just a commodity that can be sold to the highest bidder? Chapter 4. The path of insulting a Brahmin, or the tongue on the stone. This path is perhaps the most dangerous of all in everyday life. Because offending, pushing, or, God forbid, striking a Brahmin could happen to anyone in the heat of a domestic quarrel. And you didn't need to be a criminal for it. It was enough to simply lose your temper. So, you're at the city market. Crowds, noise, the cries of vendors. You're pushing through the crowd with a basket of vegetables. A Brahmin is striding importantly towards you. In his opinion, everyone should make way for him. But in the crowd, that's hard to do. He accidentally, or maybe demonstratively, brushes you with his elbow. You, tired and laden with purchases, flare up like dry grass. You shout something rude and offensive after him. Maybe, in your anger, you even shove him in the back so he's not so arrogant. At that very moment, when your hand touches his body, or a swear word leaves your lips, you cease to be just a person. In the eyes of the law, and those around you, you become a natural disaster, a dangerous infection that must be immediately isolated and neutralized. The judges won't bother figuring out who was right or wrong in the quarrel. Status decides everything. The laws of Manu here are as clear as a surgical scalpel. For verbally insulting a Brahmin, even if he started it, the punishment was the cutting out of the tongue. For striking him even lightly, even accidentally, the cutting off of the hand. for spitting on or towards a Brahmin, the cutting off of the lips, for passing wind near him, the cutting out of the anus, for urinating near him, the cutting off of the penis. No extenuating circumstances. No, he started it. Why such seemingly monstrous injustice and cruelty? The answer lies in the very essence of the worldview. A Brahmin is not just a person. He is not your neighbor, with whom you can quarrel over a spot in the market. A Brahmin is the living embodiment of the Vedas, the sacred texts, the bearer of sacred knowledge, the link between the world of humans and the world of the gods. His body is a temple. By insulting him, you insult not him personally, but the gods themselves, wisdom itself, the entire world order that he represents. Scary? You bet. Now ask yourself, are there figures in our world today whose criticism is effectively taboo? Not legally, but at the level of public consensus? Whose words and status are protected with the same almost religious strictness? And what are the consequences? Career, social, reputational, of criticizing or insulting them. Maybe our Brahmins have simply changed their clothes, but the mechanism for protecting elites remains the same. Chapter 5. The Path of a Brahmin's Gold, or Sharp Stakes in the Dark. Theft is always a crime in any society. But in ancient India, the severity of the crime was measured not by the amount of damage in rupees, but by the ritual status of the victim. Imagine that you, having completely despaired, or being blinded by an insatiable lust for gain, decide to commit the worst sin in the property sphere. You break into a Brahmin's house, into his holy of holies, and steal his gold. In Indian tradition, gold is not just a precious metal, it is the metal of the sun, Surya. It is a symbol of purity, incorruptibility, immortality, and spiritual light. Stealing gold from a Brahmin, from the one closest to the gods, means committing double sacrilege. This is not just theft. This is an attack on the very spiritual and material foundation of the universe. It's as if someone tried to steal a piece of the sun. I am quoting the Laws of Manu almost verbatim so you can feel the style. The king should have the thief who stole gold from a Brahmin wounded with sharp stakes. You are not just executed, you are used. You are tied to a post or laid on the ground, and the executioners begin slowly driving sharp bamboo stakes into your body, not to kill you immediately, but so that the pain is maximal and prolonged. Your body on the stake becomes a sacrificial pillar, a frightening sign for all who pass by. Some texts specify that the stake should be red hot, or that the thief should be burned alive over a slow fire. Variations could be different, but the essence is one. Death must be as painful and as public as possible. Chapter 6. The Path of Adultery with the Guru's Wife, or the Bed of Red-Hot Iron. This is, without a doubt, the most terrible scenario from the perspective of the morality of that era. Only the murder of a Brahmin could overshadow it. A guru is not just a school teacher. A guru is your spiritual father, the person who reveals to you the meaning of the sacred texts, who leads you from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. He gives you a second birth, not in a physical, but in a spiritual sense. His wife is like a mother to the student. She is equally sacred and inviolable. Between you is a sacred distance that cannot be crossed even in thought. But let's imagine the unthinkable happened. You are a young student, full of strength and passion. The guru's wife is not yet old, a beautiful woman, perhaps unhappy in her marriage to an elderly man absorbed in rituals. A spark ignites between you. First, furtive glances, then accidental touches during the offering of flowers, then secret notes. And then, one night, When the guru has gone to another city to give lectures, you meet. If this liaison is discovered, and in the closed world of the ashram, secrets always come to light, your fate is sealed. And it will be horrifying, because this is not just adultery. You have violated the most sacred bonds that bind the entire system of discipleship, the transmission of knowledge, spiritual kinship, and trust. The punishment, described in the Puranas and epic texts, was legendary in its gruesome, theatrical symbolism. You could be burned on a bed of red-hot iron. Another variant, they would force you to embrace a white-hot statue of a woman or a man, and you would burn alive in that deadly embrace. Or, they would throw you to specially trained dogs in the main city square. Chapter 7. The Path of Killing a Woman, or the Waves that Reject the Body. Murder itself is a grave sin in any culture. But in the hierarchy of sins in ancient India, the murder of a woman, especially a pregnant one, or a child, stood completely apart. It was an attack on the very future of the community. In Indian tradition, a woman is Shakti, energy, the source of life. She is the embodiment of the goddess Lakshmi, who bestows prosperity. To kill a woman is to extinguish this light, to break the chain of future births. To kill a pregnant woman is to commit a double murder, to destroy not only the mother, but also the soul that was already preparing to enter this world. This was considered an act that defiles not only the murderer, but also the very land on which it happened. For such a murder, the unconditional death penalty was prescribed, but it often included an element of additional, symbolic disgrace. For example, drowning, but not simple drowning, just throwing into the water and forgetting. It was believed that the sacred river Ganges, or any other river, receiving the body of the murderer of a woman or child, could become defiled to such an extent that it would affect the entire surrounding area. Therefore, a heavy stone might be tied to the condemned person's feet. They would be bound in chains, and thrown not into the river, but into a deep stagnant lake, into a swamp, where the water does not touch the bottom, and does not flow further. The symbolism here is perfectly clear. The murderer is denied even a final resting place. The element of water, which should purify and accept the body, rejects him. He becomes part of that rot, that swamp, that non-place. Chapter 8. The Path of Stealing an Elephant, or Treason in a Single Act. Now let's move from the dark sphere of personal, family relations to the bright, politicized world of state power. You are not a simple peasant or a student in an ashram. You are an elephant driver in the royal stables. This is a prestigious and responsible position. The elephant in ancient India is not just a large animal. It is a tank, a ballistic missile, a bulldozer, and a symbol of the ruler's divine powers simultaneously. A king could be proud of his cavalry, but true power was measured by the number and quality of war elephants. An elephant in battle is a living fortress, hard to stop. On the elephant's back sat the king himself during parades and battles. Elephants participated in religious processions, carrying images of the gods. Stealing an elephant is roughly equivalent to stealing a nuclear submarine or the presidential airplane today. And so you, swayed by the promises of mountains of gold, from an enemy agent, or simply out of greed, decide to do it. At night you lead the best, the largest royal elephant from its stall, take it along secret paths, out of the city, beyond the kingdom, to the enemy. This is no longer theft in the ordinary sense. This is not a crime against property. This is high treason in its purest form, the most severe of all possible secular non-religious thefts. Through your actions you undermine the country's defense capability, deprive the king of a symbol of his power and might, and strike at the prestige of the entire dynasty. The punishment for this can only be one thing: immediate and maximally painful execution. Without a long trial, without the right to defense, without options. You will be caught a mahout with a stolen elephant can't go far, and your fate will be horrific. You could be fed to tigers in a special pit. You could be crushed by other elephants. This was considered particularly humiliating, as you are killed by the very animal you betrayed. You could be impaled on the main road leading into the city, so that every merchant entering the capital could see what happens to traitors. Your body, slowly dying on the stake, becomes a map on which is written in bloody letters: "Here lies the boundary of duty to the king." Chapter 9. The Path of an Untouchable Shadow, or Social Death. Imagine, you belong to the Vaishya Varna. You are a respected cloth merchant, with a shop in the market, a house, a family. You are walking down a narrow street. Towards you, hugging the wall to avoid accidentally touching anyone, comes a man in dirty, tattered clothes, with a stick in his hand. He taps the stick on the ground, or on the wall, warning everyone of his approach. This is a Chandala, an untouchable. Those whose professions cleaning rubbish, working with leather, cremating bodies, make them permanently ritually impure. He tries to keep his distance, but the street is narrow. His shadow falls on you for a moment when the sun comes out from behind a cloud. Or, even worse, he, sweaty from hard work, accidentally shakes off a drop of sweat, and it lands on your clothes. That's it. You are now defiled. You need to rush home, take off your clothes, take a purifying bath, perform rituals. But the real disaster happens if you make a fatal mistake. Imagine you are traveling, exhausted from hunger and thirst. By the side of the road sits a Chandala, eating a flatbread. He has a pot of water. You, not seeing his clothes in the twilight, or simply out of desperation, approach him and ask for food. He hands you a flatbread. You eat it. You wash it down with water from his pot. At that very moment, in the eyes of your community, in the eyes of your family, you cease to exist as a Vaishya. You have fallen. You have defiled yourself by associating with an untouchable at the deepest level, through accepting food and water. Your caste turns away from you instantly and forever. Your wife leaves you. Your children disown you. Neighbors stop talking to you. You become an outcast. You are alive. You breathe. You walk the same earth, but you no longer exist for society. You are a ghost. You are a nobody. You sink to the bottom, into the same category of untouchables from whom you took food. Social death has occurred. Execution of the body is finite. It lasts a moment, or an hour. Execution of your personality, your place in the world, lasts the rest of your life. And this is perhaps the most terrible punishment that could befall a person in that collectivist society. In our world today, there are also our own forms of untouchability, whether political, professional, or moral. There are people whom society cancels, with whom one cannot deal, association with whom is toxic and reputationally dangerous, and the consequences of being defiled by contact with such a person can be just as destructive for a career in social life. Only instead of a shadow, we have hashtags, and instead of caste, we have a pool of respectable people. The form has changed, but not the essence. Chapter 10. The Path of Unfulfilled Duty, or the Shame that is worse than death. And so we come to the last, the 10th path. It does not lead to a specific type of execution, It does not describe punishment for a specific action. This is the path of a state. This is the path of adharma, lawlessness, evading one's sole and primary purpose. Imagine a kshatriya, a warrior, a member of the varna of rulers and protectors. A battle has begun. Arrows whistle around, elephants roar, chariots clash. Suddenly, fear, a sticky animal fear, grips his heart. He turns his chariot around and flees the battlefield, abandoning his warriors to certain death. He saved his life, but what awaits him? He won't be impaled. He won't be burned on red-hot iron. Most likely, he will simply be expelled from the Kshatriya community. But this exile will mean for him something more than just losing his job. He has covered himself in shame forever. Shame that will haunt him in this life and determine his horrific rebirth in the next. He will die, and his soul, burdened by the sin of cowardice and non-fulfillment of duty, will be reborn in the body of a dog, a pig, or, worse, an insect, to crawl in the mud for millions of years until it atones for its guilt. Or imagine a Brahmin who refuses to teach. He has the knowledge, he is obliged to pass it on to students, but he is lazy or wants to live for his own pleasure. He accumulates sin. Or a householder, the head of a family, who does not marry and does not father a son. A son is needed not just to continue the line. A son is needed to perform shraddha, funerary rites for deceased ancestors. If there is no son, the ancestors remain hungry in the world of spirits. They curse their lineage. Such a person is falling. He's not just a bad father. He is a destroyer of the connection between generations. This is the main deterrent factor of that society. Not the fear of pain, not the fear of public execution, but this all-encompassing, existential horror, the fear of being wrong, the fear of not playing one's role in the cosmic drama, the fear of shame during life, and terrible rebirth after death. This was stronger than any royal decree. It was imbibed with mother's milk. It was the foundation of the personality. You fall out of the circle of destiny. Your life loses not only social, but also metaphysical meaning. You become a void, not only here and now, but for eternity. That is what real death meant for a person of ancient India. And so we have walked all 10 paths, from boiling oil to icy rejection, from the pain of the body to the pain of the spirit, from fear of the king's sword to the terror of the wheel of Samara. We no longer punish the body, at least, not openly and publicly in so-called civilized countries. But we have invented new, no less refined types of execution. Execution by reputation, through the media and social media, where one careless word spoken many years ago can destroy a career and a life. Execution by career, through blacklists and corporate ostracism. Execution of social ties, where friends and colleagues turn away from a person because they have become toxic. We still live in systems. Our systems have just become more complex, more intricate, and the punishments less bloody, but not always less painful. The journey is over. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, in the labyrinths of history, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.